almost, sorry,
Sorry about
I've been
that.
there, I've been there for almost 20 years. I also grew up in the same school board that I am currently employed in. So I grew up in Oakville. So I had in the 80s and the 90s. So I have a lot of experience of being the only, as many of the children are. Some of them aren't these days, but we definitely were the only. So understanding how that feels as a student. And then, of course, moving forward into my educational career as an educator, moving into the spaces and continuing to be one of the only educators as well, particularly in my board. But seeing the amount of Black students growing and growing, and the representation of educators not quite even keeping up pace with that. So that obviously is a huge gap. So I am always honored to be in spaces to share knowledge with other Black parents, because we know that coming in together in community and collectivizing and sharing our knowledge is some of the best ways to be able to, keep ourselves going. So there will be at the end, there is a one pager that will be shared with you all as well, which will have the main points of my presentation included in it. So you don't have to scramble to take notes and do whatever you need to make sure you have the information that you need. But I do want you to know that there will be a one pager included. So maybe, and also there is my email as well. If you need to contact me, at any point in the future, please feel free to reach out. Like, no problem. I can take questions then as well. And as we said, the questions can be at the end in case I answer your question, but if you have like a pencil and paper and you're trying to take notes, like definitely note any questions down, and I'll do my best to address them at the end. And if I don't have the answer to your question, which I might not, then at least we can, somehow get you the answer at a later time. All right, so we will begin with our presentation. So very interestingly enough, the next slide is all about, someone had said it seems it's a very difficult document to read because for whatever reason in education, we love acronyms. So these are some acronyms, and these acronyms are going to be in the one pager of acronyms and terms that you're going to hear. So before I even go into the acronyms, I want everyone to understand that when you are in these meetings or when you're receiving these documents and they don't make sense, we are all paying our taxes for our children to attend these schools and have access to this education. So if you ever need clarification and you need to go and have a phone call with the teachers or the administrators or ask for a meeting to explain the documents more clearly, that is your right as a parent to do so. So if you're in a meeting with educators, and it can be intimidating, like I understand that as well. Like when I'm in a meeting as a parent and as an educator, it can be very overwhelming. But there are times where you can say, excuse me, I don't know what that acronym means, or I'm not clear about what that means. Explain it to me. And they need to be able to take that time to explain it to you. So to be able to, and we have to just use our voices and say, stop and explain, because there's things that as parents you will not understand. And as educators, we are to be aware that there isn't necessarily that the parent sitting at the table is not going to understand all of our beautiful acronyms that we have an excessive need to use as educators. So here are some common acronyms that you're going to see or hear. They can change slightly between boards, but overall they're kind of aligned with this. But again, they can be slightly different between boards. I'm speaking from my experience in my board and kind of, speaking to other teachers and other boards to get an idea, but they can slightly change. But these are usually the words you're going to see. So you're going to see IEP, which is the individual education plan, spec ed, special education, CERT, special education resource teacher, psych ed, which is a psychoeducational assessment, LD, learning disability, MID, mild intellectual disability. I lost my share screen there. Hold on. Oh, we're back, right?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect, thank you. IPRC, Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, and ISC/SRP, In-School Review Committee and Student Review Process. So, what we know about Black students and special education in schools is that we are overrepresented in special education programs, and we're very underrepresented in gifted programs. We also know, and just also wanted to say as an aside, I am using two screens, so I am looking back and forth. I'm not paying attention to like my child that's over here or anything like that. So just to let you know, that is why I'm looking back and forth as well. So we're underrepresented in gifted programs. We also know that special education and IEPs can be weaponized against our community and lead to labeling and streaming. So streaming being is that we are funneled into certain programs that do not or may not align with our capabilities. And this is based on systemic racism and society's expectations of what Black people can and cannot do. So it starts happening from the time the children enter school. So a lot of times we talk about streaming in high school when you're talking about academic, applied, etc. But that whole process is beginning as soon as the children enter school, how they're grouped, different programs they're selected for, so on and so forth. That happens from the time that they are young. And we also know that with advocacy and collectivism, that it's going to force school boards to align their practices and their policies, and specifically those outlined by the ministry. So when we work together to build knowledge, knowledge is absolutely key to stay informed and to stay informed and to be informed with the most updated information. So they're going to put a link in the chat to the ministry document. And this ministry document it's called the Individual Education Plan. And I want you to click on that link and I want you to save it as your favorites, because that is a clear outline from the Ontario Ministry about what the IEP is, giving definitions, explanations, and the purpose of an IEP is to ensure that the children or the students are successful in their education. So it is beneficial for students. For us as Black people, we know that the system isn't necessarily set up to be beneficial for us. So what is beneficial for others oftentimes doesn't become beneficial for us. But with knowledge and information and collectivism, we know that we are going to make it beneficial for us. It's beneficial for everybody else. It's going to be beneficial for us. We have to just make sure we advocate for that for our children. So I want you to really take that document or that link and keep it and review it when you have a moment, because it's going to outline the IEP and the purpose of it and how it's supposed to be helping the children. So, as I just said, this is like a little, speech here. We can be empowered, advocate for our children, and ensure schools are providing access to an education by which all children are entitled as per the Education Act of Ontario. So this is going to empower us to be able to ensure that our children are receiving what they need to be receiving. So someone said that the process and what's going on, they find it a bit overwhelming and slightly confusing, and it is. There's a lot of steps involved and a lot of things. And because it's with our children, it's an intimate process because it's with our children, and it's hard because we don't really understand what is happening with this process. So I'm going to do my best to break down the process of an IEP and explain it to you. So this may be where people might have questions for later. And again, each board and that link to the document will outline this process a little bit as well, but I'm going to try to explain it to you as well. So with that, you're going to understand the steps, and there's overlap in the steps as well, but we'll start at phase one. So phase one is recognition. So recognition is exactly what it is we know that there is some sort of gap in between the child's capabilities or what they're producing or they're not meeting the expectations of the curriculum. So you might note it at home. The teacher might let you know, for example, they're testing their reading and they're a few levels, they're not up to the grade that they should be. Their math skills or whatever it might be, if someone recognizes that there is an issue. So the next phase is intervention. So that intervention is going to look, it's like a two-tiered system. So tier one is classroom level intervention strategies. So the classroom teacher is doing things in the classroom with the students to close those gaps. So you're looking at small group instruction, one-on-one instruction. So it's what the teacher is doing in the classroom to help. Now, tier two intervention strategies are school board level interventions. So they're different throughout different boards. So whatever the boards have purchased, the programming that they've purchased, they train special education resource teachers, CERTs, and most boards are called, or many boards are called CERTs. They train them in order to deliver that programming to the children who are struggling. And that's a tier two level intervention. So there's a reading program called Empower. There's a math program called Do the Math. They're different for boards. There's many different ones, but those are tier two interventions. So if the interventions are successful, we're looking at the top there, the process will stop. Yay, the child's caught up. You keep an eye on it as a parent to ensure they're not falling behind again. Advocate, of course, if you need to, but otherwise, the process of interventions would stop. The child would, continue on into the education environment and live their best lives, hopefully. If the interventions are unsuccessful, then the process continues to phase 3. So that's going to be a referral for evaluation. And the evaluation is going to be a couple of things. So the first thing you're going to have is a school. So again, this is the bottom says parent advocacy. And notice how that is encompassing of this whole process is that you need to advocate, make sure you have to follow up. I know we all have full-time jobs, but this also becomes a full-time job for us, of course, as well. There is follow-up that needs to be done because let's be honest, and there's lots going on, especially in schools. So you want to be sometimes the noisiest so that they will make sure that they prioritize your child, or you're following up, or you're doing whatever you can to advocate, checking in with the teacher. So now you're going to have an evaluation. So what they're going to do in this phase 3, it's going to be an in-school assessment. So again, varies from board to board, but you're going to hear, you may hear of like something called a CATIA, or you may hear of something called a Woodcock-Johnson. And those are assessments that are, again, administered by the special education resource teacher with your child. And you should be informed of this process the whole time this is going on. That you wouldn't be informed of this after, oh, by the way, your child had a CATIA last week. No, they would be letting you know when it's happening, and they'd be letting you know that it's going to happen. When the school, or when you've requested it, or when the school is telling you this is going to happen, you're also going to really want to ask for some timelines. When should I hear about the results of my child's in-school assessments? Because I've heard of families that wait 8 months. This is not an 8-month process. Once you've been told these things are going to happen, not that things happen, overnight, but they should be happening at a pace, because this is a time-sensitive issue, because the longer the child goes without the proper supports, the more complex this problem can become. So you're going to have things like the CATIA, the Woodcock-Johnson, and these are in school, again, administered by the CERT, and they're going to measure reading, writing, and math, and they're standardized to Canadian norms. So what that means is when you get the results, which you have a right to see all of it. So anything about your child, any assessment that's done, you can say, show it to me, and it needs to be shared with you. Okay, so you always are able to see everything your child is doing at any time, because this is your child and it is your child's education. So you always have a right to see. So what you'd see on those results, for example, if your child is, let's say, 10 years old and they're reading at the level of an 8-year-old, you'd see the age of your child, and then you'd see reading level 8 years old. They may also do it by grade. So your child may be in grade 6 and they might be at, for example, a grade 8 level. So you're going to see those results listed like that, because they're standardized by Canadian norms. Okay, so the next thing, if that in-class assessment comes back, again, alarming, being the child is having a difficult time in an area or a number of areas, what can happen is that you're going to be looking for informal and formal psych ed evaluations. You're looking for formal psych ed evaluation. So at the top, it says informal IEP. What that means is that there's no formal diagnosis at this point. We just know that the child is struggling. We've done some in-class interventions. We are supporting the child and they're still struggling. So maybe there's something else at play here. So maybe they have a learning disability. Maybe there is an intellectual delay. So, and that's a bit of a waiting process. So while you're waiting for your more formal education, which is known as a psychoeducational assessment, that is psych ed for short. That's the term you're going to hear, but it's a psychoeducational assessment. While you're waiting for that, your child can be placed on an informal IEP. This is an aside. Not all boards have informal IEPs. Okay. And some boards do not, some boards do. So you'd have to see what your board does. However, whether or not there's an informal IEP in place, the teachers and whoever else is working with your child would need to be ensuring that they're supporting and providing the resources and the needs that the child needs in order to meet the expectations, regardless if there's an informal IEP or not. All students in school are given that because that's why they're in school. So now to a formal, so the informal testing is the CATIA Woodcock Johnson. So now we're on phase 4. The formal testing is the psychoeducational assessment. So there is 2 ways essentially that you are going to be able to, or not necessarily, there's 2 ways to have a psychoeducational assessment. It can be done through the school and it can be done privately. So privately, so through the school is your child is placed on a wait list for a psych ed, a psychoeducational assessment. So they'll be placed on that wait list, and the wait list can be long. And the school boards will tell you it can be 18 months to 2 years. So for some people, there is the option, and some people you may have to wait that time because it's a board-wide list. It's not just a school-wide list. So all of the students from the board who need psychoeducational assessments are placed on that list. So if you have access to coverage like benefits, or you have access to funding, you could potentially go and have a private psychoeducational assessment done. So for my daughters, so both of my daughters were diagnosed with learning disabilities. I went to a private place, and because I had benefits to be able to do so. And it can be word of mouth, like, do you know anyone that does psych eds? Or you can ask your doctor, can you please recommend a psychologist that will provide a psychoeducational assessment for my child? So a number of ways you can access it. You call, sometimes they have wait lists as well. You call around, word of mouth. So those potentially could cost upwards of $3,000. That's why benefits can cover that. So as an aside for benefits as well, to make it like for a little bit more, to make so you can understand it a little bit, is because parents are involved in the process, part of the coverage can go under the parent's name and under the child's name. And if there's more than one parent, both parents. So that will sometimes cover the cost depending on the coverage. But again, that's an accessibility issue, which obviously needs to be changed in the world, but one thing at a time. So that assessment is pricey and is a long wait list because it is very involved. So what you're going to be looking at is it's going to be over days, and your child will be going for a number of hours each day, depending on how long they can sit, the age of the child, etc. So they will be going there, and the psychologist will be running a number of tests on them. So cognitive testing, academic, and they're also going to do a thorough testing of the whole child. So they're going to be asking you a ton of questions. So you'll be sitting in there and you'll be asked questions as well. And you're going to talk about their general health, any milestones, if there was any delay in milestones, any behavioral components, developmental, any regulation, mental health, family history. And of course, it's always recommended that you get a vision and hearing test for your child as well, just so we can rule out those kinds of things when you're looking at a psychoeducational assessment. So it is very involved. The result will be that you will get a report. And for my daughter, my oldest daughter, she was diagnosed with, essentially, they don't call it dyslexia, but that's what it was. And it was 14 pages. So and that is not it's not a very complex diagnosis by any means. And it is quite lengthy. So it is a a beautiful piece of data as parents for us to have to be able, and they also list, so it'll go through everything and all of the results of their testing, and the psychologist will sit with you after and go over the whole thing with you. They also offer many of them, or you can ask for it if they need to talk with the school, or if you want them at a meeting with the school, you can also ask if they'll do that as well. So again, you're not stuck kind of using all of this language that you don't understand. But a really important part of that document, or that report that you get, is that they will give you a list of interventions and strategies and tools and resources that the school can be using and that you can be using at home to support your child's learning moving forward. So it is very, very valuable report. It's a very valuable document. And that will also have on it, either there's a formal diagnosis of whatever the case may be, or there's no formal diagnosis. Okay. Also, the private, so let's say the school does their psychoeducational assessment and you go through the school. Then for whatever reason, let's say you're like, I don't know about this. I feel like perhaps my child is gifted and they're saying they're not. I think my child may have a mild intellectual disability and the school's assessment saying it's not. You can still get your own private psychoeducational assessment done. And it is noted that the private assessment will trump the school's assessment. So again, that's about access, that's about money, that's about time, but it is to be noted that that is the case. So you may want to keep that in mind as well. So if your child is diagnosed or not with a formal diagnosis of an exceptionality, that means we go to a formal IEP. And that IEP is the document that most of you, if your child's ready on an IEP, will be receiving. So they look different from board to board. But again, if you go back to that link for the IEP from the ministry, that will have everything that an IEP should have on it. And we're going to go over it a little bit as well later, but that will have everything on it for your child's IEP. It'll have teachers' names, administrators' names. It is a legal document, which I will get to later as well. So all of those items will be very clearly outlined for you on that IEP, and that's a formal diagnosis. So it will say that on the IEP, exceptionality and what the diagnosis is. Then phase 6 and phase 7 is the development of the IEP. And again, noting at the bottom, parent advocacy, you are involved in this process. You can be involved in this process the whole way through. So phase 7 is the implementation of the IEP. That's the in-school review committee, student, I don't know what SRP stands for. And then phase 8 for formal diagnosis is it's reevaluated. And that's with the IPRC. That's the Identification Placement Review Committee. So if there's a formal diagnosis from your psych ed, from your psychoeducational assessment, once a year, you're going to have an IPRC, Identification Placement Review Committee. As a parent, you are to be invited to that meeting. And it is a formal kind of sit down meeting where there's an administrator and two other educators, I believe, and then a parent is always invited. So I will say that people are here because they want to be involved in their children's lives, but those meetings, you want to be at those meetings if they are accessible to you. If they aren't accessible, you can speak to the administrator about, perhaps doing it sometime outside of school time so that you can be involved in this process. And that happens once a year, or it happens at the request of a parent. So if you say, I'd like to have an IPRC meeting regarding my child's IEP, you can do that at any time. You don't need to wait for that year to be up for the school to tell you that needs to happen. That can happen at any time. Okay, but it has to happen legally once a year. And the teachers and the administrators will be signing, and they'll read the strengths and next steps for your child, and it's like a formal process. So if there's no formal diagnosis, then you will have what's called an informal IEP. Some boards don't have informal IEPs. I have never worked in a board that doesn't have informal IEPs, but it will be the same process. with the development of the IEP and the implementation of the IEP, meaning that the child is now that we all see that these are this is what the child needs to be using. And then that the process there is no IPRC because there is, so the first is IPRC identification. There is no identification because there is no formal diagnosis. So therefore there is no IPRC. And the P is placement. So where is the child placed in the school? Are they placed in the classroom with resource support? Are they placed in a separate classroom with a few other students with EA support? It's very much varying of different types of support, and different school boards also provide different levels of support for their students as well. This is the most complex part. So try not to be overwhelmed by it. Again, this is also on the one pager, but just know that the most important part of this that you need to take is that you can ask questions whenever you want. You can ask to look at your child's IEP whenever you want. You can look at any data that people have collected on your child whenever you want. And you are more than entitled to contact the school to get clarification on anything whenever you want. And you also have input on your child's IEP and how things are progressing in the classroom. Okay, so what exactly is an IEP? So, as we know, it is an individual education plan. So it is a living document. Okay, it's a working document. People use the word living document, working document. It's legally binding, and it's the administrator's responsibility to ensure that it's being followed. Every teacher that is working with your child within an area that is impacted by the IEP needs to be following the IEP. So they need to be looking and they need to be following it. So if it's somebody that comes in to teach social studies, for example, and that is an area that is impacted by the IEP, that teacher needs to be aware of that. All teachers need to be aware of the IEP before the school year starts. Okay. So I'm just going to read exactly what it says. If the IEP is not followed, it is problematic for the school, as the administrator is legally responsible for ensuring its implementation, because this is a legal document. This is how we are empowered as Black parents. As we know now, or we knew before, this is a legal document. It's legally binding. And it's problematic if it's not being followed. It's not problematic if it is. Everything should be going well. Every educator that teaches the child and the subjects impacted by the IEP are legally obligated to implement the IEP. If not, the student's access to education as per the Education Act of Ontario is being violated, which is a human rights issue. Okay? But what do you do if the IEP is not followed? What avenues can Black parents take in this colonial institution if it's not being followed? So what I would suggest is preventative measures. So school year is started and you go in and you meet the teacher, or you ask for a phone call meeting with the teacher. I always go in and meet the teachers, and this is my child's IEP. You go in with the conversation. I know you're familiar with my child's IEP. I like to discuss to see how they're doing, or what to expect, and make sure you're there before there's problems. So it's like a preventative measure to ensure that it's being followed before anything cannot be followed. And just checking in with the teacher. And if they have any questions, they want to talk to you, so on and so forth. So that is a way to ensure that it's followed. What if it isn't being followed? Then you would be reaching out to the classroom teacher to say, these are the accommodations, or this is what the IEP says. This is what my child is telling me is happening, or what I'm seeing coming home. Can we please meet to further discuss how the IEP is being followed in the classroom? So you would make sure that you reach out to the teacher. If you'd reach out to the teacher, I would also CC the administrator at that point. If that continues, you talk to the administrator, and then it would escalate from there. But at that point, we would all hope that wouldn't be escalating. But if it is, then you just continue to advocate for your child. Also, your child should be experiencing success and making gains and improvements. So if your child is still unsuccessful and they have an IEP and they're getting D's or they're getting A's in both ways. So if they have an IEP and they're still really struggling, or if they have and the IEP is being followed and they're still really struggling, or they have an IEP, it's being followed and it's quote unquote, it's going to be too easy for them, then that IEP, the expectations need to be revised. And that can happen at any time. And of course, at the parent's request as well. So if you're seeing either way, like they're still really struggling or they're not, make sure that it's being implemented and followed. And if so, how are we revising? And this can be ongoing. So it needs to be adjusted always to meet the child's needs. Oftentimes it's kind of left until, okay, this is the next year in school and we all naturally progress. But that can happen at any time in the year, the revising of the IEP. If it's still not being followed and you're very concerned, as you would be, there's also parents of Black children who most of us are probably familiar with. Maybe if you're not, parents of Black children is also an avenue where you can fill out an incident report with them and they can help you navigate that situation as well. So on IEPs, what you're going to see are accommodations and modifications. I want to explain the difference between those before we speak a little bit more. So accommodations are supports that are put in place to help a student access the general curriculum. The expectations of the general curriculum do not change. Now, this is important because in school, all children have access to accommodations, not only children with IEPs. It will be listed on the IEP as an accommodation, but by definition, all children have access to an accommodation because the curriculum is not changing. So how the student responds or how the material is delivered is not necessarily reliant upon an IEP. However, the IEP will hold people to a certain standard as well, where it's different than a modification, where there's changes in the curriculum based on the student's individual abilities. So modifications typically change the instructional level, so it's at a different grade. The content, so it's a different amount, so less expectations, or the performance criteria for the student. Okay, so that's the difference between accommodation and modifications. Now we bring this up because accommodations and modifications can change your child's pathway, their educational pathway, through secondary, post-secondary, as well as through elementary school. So for an accommodation, there's 3 types of accommodations that you'll see listed on the IEP under the title accommodation. And again, if you look back to that government document, those are listed there as well. So you have instructional accommodations. That's how the children access the curriculum. So examples of this would be copies of notes, maybe some extra time, oral instruction, and assistive technology. That's an example of instructional accommodations. Environmental accommodations would be preferential seating, or they have an alternate space to complete their work or complete any activities. And then the third type of accommodation is for assessments. So this is accommodations that are provided to help them demonstrate or to help them demonstrate that they've met the curriculum expectations. So for example, they may need to give an oral response instead of writing something down. Maybe someone scribes for them. Assistive technology, I have this in bold in my notes everywhere because assistive technology is very big and like a reduction in the number of questions that they need to answer. Now we're looking at modifications. That's the programming is changed. So for example, your child may be at a grade 5 level and they may be working at a grade 7 level, or they may be at a grade 5 level and working at a kindergarten level. So that is, you're changing the program. So you're changing the expectations. So this can impact their secondary school pathways. And we discussed this with Black communities because we know that there is the streaming, which I talked about at the beginning, into certain programs. So if your child is streamed into a locally developed program, this could potentially limit their post-secondary options. It's not negative because there are children that will fit into the locally developed stream, and that's okay. But if there is reason for you to think that perhaps the locally developed stream may not be the pathway for them, it could potentially impact their post-secondary. So what I mean by that is that for many college level classes, and there is an option for this, but for many college level classes, the only prerequisite that you may need is grade 12 applied English. So if they're locally developed, that can limit their college, their post-secondary. However, it is okay if they're locally developed because colleges do offer bridge courses. So if they do take locally developed and they like to attend post-secondary, it's something that can definitely still happen because there are bridge courses through the colleges. Okay, so it's not like, oh, you can never attend post-secondary. That's not the case by any means. However, you want to be sure as a parent when you're accommodating or when you're advocating for your child that they are on the stream, and we're going to be extra diligent as Black parents that they are on the stream that is most suited for that student. And that is when you're going to ask for the information, the data, what has been done with the child in the school. All of these things are really important for you to advocate for your children. And also there's other pathways that children can take if they're taking locally developed classes, which is they can take, you know, a locally developed class during the school year, and then the summer take an applied level class as well. So there's lots of different pathways, but all of this to say it can be very overwhelming. I know it's a lot of information, but it is important for individual children. So you're gonna have to know your child specifically, because what fits for one child isn't going to be the same for another child. So you really want to have, difficult to access, a good guidance counselor who is going to guide, who you have faith in. So I'll find these people who is going to do what is best for your child. But this is where community comes in. Because let's say that isn't the case for your child at school, where you don't trust these people, then this is where community comes in, where now you can reach out to community in order to say, this is the issue that I'm having. Can someone please help me? My email address is still attached here. Like, make sure you're reaching out for those supports. You're not alone in this process at any point, because I'm looking now, there's 37 people here. So there is community and finding out what can be the best pathway for your child. Okay. And any additional
Sorry,
support? Yeah.
Nia, if just to reiterate, if you can just clarify again, there's a question in the chat. What does it mean locally developed stream? What are the limitations that might provide to someone?
Yeah. So and again, boards can work differently, but to put it kind of generally, in elementary school, they travel through elementary school. Sometimes they have separate classrooms for certain students. So in my board, they're called quote unquote contained classrooms. And they would have a high number of educational assistants. In my board, they're called EAs, which is not a classroom teacher. There is classroom teachers in there, but they also have like people who help out as well. But when you move into high school, their grade 9 is de-streamed, so everybody's together generally, again, unless there is a severe or more complex disability or intellectual development, then they can still definitely have separate classrooms as well. And then they integrate the children as much as possible into the school day. But in grade 10, 11, 12, they have 3 different levels of class. So you'd have locally developed, and then you would have applied or college level, and then you also have academic or university level. So if anybody went to school in Canada back in the 90s, then that's the equivalent of like basic. Oh, it was basic, general, and advanced. So kind of parallel to that, if you went to school in Canada in the 90s, if you didn't, then that is meaningless to you. But essentially 3 levels. So, and then there's also mixed courses. So there's college university classes that children can take as well in grade 11 and 12. So what locally developed is, it's for children with more severe learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities, that they aren't necessarily, they can definitely go to post-secondary and do things after university, or sorry, after high school, my apologies, after secondary school. But the limitation is that there's only certain courses that they'll be able to take as someone who is in a locally developed class. Is that helpful or is that not helpful? Please let me know.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's the difference between modifications and accommodations. So there are other considerations that we need to make. And so there's, okay, so before, when we were going through our flow chart, there was a section that said formal diagnosis. So what the formal diagnosis is, there's 5 categories of what's called an exceptionality. And you will see the word exceptionality on the IEP. This is also going to be in that online, that link that will that you were given earlier. So there's 5 categories of exceptionalities. There's physical, communication, intellectual, behavior, or multiple. And multiple means clearly more than one of the above. Okay. So some IEPs have a behavior component. So a behavior component is intended for people who have specific behavioral problems that go on for a period of time and to such a degree that it's affecting educational performance and cannot be traced to a health issue. This is the important part. It cannot be traced to a health issue. So it's not intended, behavior as an exceptionality is not intended for kids with neurodevelopment disabilities such as ADHD or ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, or epilepsy. So ADHD is a oh my gosh, my daughter has ADHD. It's a neurodivergent neurodevelopmental issue. And as well as epilepsy, people say that has to do with behavior. None of those are at all a behavior. So ASD, autism spectrum disorder, that is a communication. So that would be under communication. So right now, ADHD is not currently recognized as an exceptionality in Ontario. So this is important because for Black families, the label of behavior can be weaponized against us. So, for example, if there is ADHD or whatever the case might be, and it's listed on the IEP under behavior, that's actually not correct because it's not current ADHD isn't currently recognized as an exceptionality in Ontario. So for ADHD, so my daughter has ADHD and it was originally listed on her IEP. It didn't necessarily, it's not, so I had it removed. So it's not that you shouldn't tell the school that your child has ADHD. It's not a behavior issue. So if it's listed anywhere or discussed as part of any sort of part of the IEP, it's just not behavior. So you want to make sure that that's very clear because behavior implies that you have some sort of control over this, and that's definitely not what that is. So again, you as Black parents, we know that those behavior labels can be harmful. So you just want to make sure you're advocating, and not to say those labels aren't going to be there in any other case. However, you just want to make sure that it is clear to you as a parent why it's there and how it's going to be helpful for your child, because the IEP, the intention again is to make sure the children are successful. So all of this information on the IEP is there to help the children. Okay. Next, we have alternative or alt reports. So these are, so you'd hear alt, but it's alternative reports. So these can be provided in addition to a report card or as the only means of reporting. So alt reports or alternative reports are intended for a child or children who have severe disabilities and will not be accessing the Ontario curriculum. And that part is important for advocacy as well, because you're going to want to make sure that you are aware of what is being reported on, because for every child there needs to be something that is reported on. That's where the alternative reports come in. So you want to be aware of what the expectations are for your child and the purpose of why those expectations are on there, and you can ask those questions as to what they may be, and that is also very varying, very individual on the child's needs, because it depends. You may have a child who's nonverbal and then those expectations change. You may have a child who's a wheelchair user and those expectations change. You may have children who are learning toileting and learning a variety of things, and those expectations definitely change. So it depends on the individual child for alt reports, but you want to make sure that as a parent, you're having an input on that as well, or you're informed as well. So your role as a parent is to advocate. A lot of work. Take a deep breath and take your time, and to ask questions. Definitely ask questions and listen to your child. So, and you know your child. and children communicate in many different ways. It depends on their level of communication, how they communicate. Sometimes they may only be able to communicate with their eyes, but we know as parents, no matter what our child is doing, they are communicating with us. No matter the developmental level of the child, they communicate with us. So listen to them, watch them, observe them, ask them questions if they're able to speak to you. Do all of those things in order to, you're watching them as you do. Keep notes. So I suggest that if you're meeting with the classroom teacher or with whomever or the special education resource teacher, that after that meeting is done, you bring your notes, you bring your pencil and paper or whatever, your phone in there, and you take notes as they're speaking. And you're asking all of your questions. And then you follow up with an email. Dear so-and-so, thank you for meeting me to discuss, and you write a summary of what the meeting was about. And that's their timestamped, and you send it, and that's their timestamped for you if you ever need to look back and say, I met with this person at this time and this person at this time. It's really helpful to keep notes. And of course, take your time. Try not to be overwhelmed. So if, let's say, it's October now and your child has an IEP and you haven't met with the teacher, there's no reason to be like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Not at all. Take your time. We are all very busy. We have lots of things going on. You're here because you care and you are a wonderful parent. And then you need to be patient with yourself and understand that you are doing your best. And that's why you're here, to get more information to make sure that you can do your best for your child as well. So that, I believe, is it for me. So if you have any questions, it's just like anything else. If you don't know something, you would ask. So make sure you ask. You're not supposed to know it all. And I am here, of course, to guide and support you should that be what you need.
There was a parent in the chat that asked about private schools. Do you know if private schools also offer an IEP?
Yeah. Yeah. IEPs are for children attending school in Ontario. So private schools also have to follow the curriculum expectations and the ministry guidelines. So if your child is in a private school, yes, there can be IEPs in a private school, 1,000%.
Okay. There was another question, and I think I had answered it. Could there be potentially more than one IPRC a year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah, there can be, because there has to be one, but you can ask for one at any time as a parent.
And I know that, like, in my other role, there's also times where you can ask for just a team meeting to meet with the team around your child. So don't be afraid to ask those questions.
And don't be afraid to meet. Like, this is their job, is to support your child. And again, we're all here, paying our money into the school system. So our children should be having the same benefits as everyone else. So you definitely ask, you advocate, you have meetings, you do all of the things that you need to do.
Perfect. There's a question from JD, and I know, and I don't know if she wants to stop the recording, but there's also, if anybody has a question, put your hand up and we can get it answered. Try not to make it too specific, because we'll spend a lot of time answering specific questions for your child. You can also connect with Nia directly, and then she could speak with you, or connect with us and we'll try to help also. So JD, I see it says JD. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi. I just wanted to go back to when you were talking about if it's not being followed. So I've gone through Parents of Black Children. I have an awesome IEP put in place. We had a transition plan. However, here we are in grade 7. It's not being followed. Contacted the superintendent, spoke with the principal. Everybody's in agreement, but it's actually not happening. Where do you go from there?
Good question.
I would say, so you're going to need to follow up, right? So it's not being followed. It needs to be followed, and there needs to be proof that it's being followed. So if there's, like, for example, if the child's in grade 7, let's say they're supposed to be, they're supposed to have oral responses instead of writing things down, or they're supposed to be getting support outside of the classroom for half an hour a day, and those things aren't happening, then I would be recording that. I'd be writing it down on the days and time, demanding another meeting with the you need to unfortunately have yet another meeting with the administrator and include the superintendent as well. Ask them, I would say to them, what do you do? What is your expectation for your teachers to follow this IEP? Because I know that it needs to be followed. There's the Ontario College of Teachers, which takes time for them to follow up, but you can also report the teacher and the administrators to the Ontario College of Teachers to say they aren't following the IEP. And this is all the evidence. So you have to, unfortunately, you have to collect evidence to show that. The question would be, now while we're collecting evidence and contacting the College of Teachers, which is OCT, the Ontario College of Teachers, what's happening to your child who's not getting the education that they should be getting? Right, it would be negatively impacting your child while we, spend all this time in meetings. So if you continue to, I want to say to essentially be relentless with it, and also do the Ontario College of Teachers things. Also say those things to them, like, do you, as administrators or as the school board, is this reported to the Ontario College of Teachers when your teachers aren't following the IEP? Because we know that it is a legally binding document. Like, you can come with that language, and that might kind of rattle people, because people sometimes think that we don't know anything, but we do. So
someone's
coming with that language might help.
Someone was asking if you usually review IEPs to give suggestions.
If I do?
Yeah.
Well, it depends, right? I don't know the child. So I could definitely look at it, but it's because I don't really know the child or what their needs are. Like, you'd have to kind of look at their psychoeducational assessments and all of those things. Like, it's kind of a lot of
True.
pieces.
The big package. Yeah.
Yeah. So it might be a lot, but if you'd like input on, like, if there's an overview and you'd like me to check it out, I can try, but I don't know if it would be useful for anyone.
With parents of Black children, I wonder if that might be part of their advocacy, like to maybe request a meeting with the resource teacher to review the IEP with the family. That might be something they do. We can ask. Okay, perfect. Somebody's also asking, are private schools required to do a psych ed assessment before putting a formal IEP in place? Well, I guess the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, so a formal IEP requires a psychoeducational assessment. And I'm not sure how private schools work, like if they have their own psychologist that they use, or if they tell parents to do it themselves. I'm not quite sure how that works.
Okay, there's another question here. And this, you see, there's a lot of exemptions and things that can be done, but obviously the school won't tell you. Am I able to get my daughter exempt from French? She's dyslexic and has an IEP, but they've made no changes to this subject. Or can I get lesser workload with the IEP?
Yeah. So as a parent, if you feel, so for French is a hard one, right? So in high school, what will happen is your child has an IEP in high school. So she can be exempt from French in high school. But in elementary school, she's technically not exempt from French. And I actually have a child right now that I know that they brought it all the way to the superintendent, and the superintendent was like, sorry, she's got to stay for French and get a grade. So what the mom had said to her is, because you're going into grade 9 next year, you sit there, you do something else, and you move on, because at the end of the day, it's not really gonna matter. But in high school, what will happen in grade 9 is your child has an IEP. So, and I don't know what grade the student is in, but this can be helpful for everyone. So when they go to select their courses for grade 9, they'll have they have 2 electives, and then they have 6 compulsories. So if your child does not have an IEP and they're struggling, there's a class they can take that's called GLS. And it takes the place, though, of one of their electives. If your child has an IEP, they still get their 2 electives. French is replaced by a course called GLE, which is a learning skills class that they get a credit for. And they pair it with whatever course, like on their timetable or on their schedule, they need the most help with. So for my youngest daughter, she's not in grade 9 yet. So she's going into grade 9. So when she moves into grade 9, she will not be taking French, and she will take GLE instead. And she'll pair it with math, because her learning disability is with math. So in the same semester she has math, She will have GLE. She will not take French. She will still graduate from high school, but she's exempt from French in grade 9 because she took GLE instead. You get a full credit. In elementary school, like I said, it's more difficult. What I used to do as a teacher often is if there was someone who had to be pulled out for extra support, it would often happen during French because we know moving forward. But some administrators, and I don't necessarily know why I'm not an administrator, they and the superintendents in elementary school, they say that you can't be exempt from French in elementary school. So it could be like you could ask the school board, you try to advocate for it, but in high school, definitely if they have an IEP, in my school board, it's formal or informal IEP. You don't have to take French. Other boards may be different, so you'd have to do your research. But no, in high school, they wouldn't have to take French.
Perfect. Okay, so Shauna Kay has her hand up, but then there's 2 questions after her, one around the applied stream and then around a diagnosis. So we'll go in that order. Shauna Kay?
Hi, Monique.
Hey there. Oh, you just went back on mute.
Hi, Monique and Nia. Thank you so much, ladies. This was great information. My child, I have children in private school, and so my experience is like one of my son has ADHD, and in order to get a psycho ed, the private school does not pay for it. It's not you have to pay out of pocket. You have to get private services for your child. The other thing is they are willing to do an IEP without the psychoeducational assessment being done. And so I think there was a mother who said that her daughter was diagnosed with ADHD and was suspended recently for physical aggression. So what happened in my son's school was that this was like 2021. When he got his diagnosis, the school recognized that there was a lot of kids that were neurodivergent in the school. And then since the pandemic, a lot of kids, even kids that didn't have a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, had executive functioning issues. So they paid for training for the staff to get executive functioning training. And then they also hired a social worker to teach my son social skills. So along with him being on medication Concerta, he also had someone who pulled him out of class for like a body break, or to teach him how to advocate for himself, to teach him how to self-regulate. So it was really good. So they do have the funds to get that. So I would encourage any parent that their kid is in private school to encourage the teachers to get training for executive functioning, to get the private school to hire someone with like a social worker to teach them social skills. So in addition to the meds, that's like, I would say, optimal for their development. And yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Shanna. That's actually really good information, because it's like a lot of times you put your child in private school thinking, well, you can, this better education, but then there's other resources that parents can't access, or they just don't have it in the schools, because we have like child and youth workers, we've got, ERWs, social workers, psychologists, but I guess depending on where you put your child, there's going to be differences. JD?
I just wanted to, I think somebody was asking about going through the IEP. I just want to add with Toronto District School Board, you can request for them to bring in a cert person from the board, and they can have a meeting to go through the IEP with the parent. If they're not feeling like they are understanding it from the school, like you can have a separate meeting just to go through the whole thing.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
And there's a parent in the chat that asked, how does applied stream affect a child going into university or college?
So grade 10 is what they would have applied academic. And then in grade 11 and grade 12, they have college university streamed. And they also have mixed courses. So it depends on what your child, like what they'd like to do post-secondary. So you would have to look to see the program that they're interested in. So a lot of schools use what's called My Blueprint, and that gives them So they took all these little quizzes and these little like kind of personality tests, and it shows what they could potentially be interested in. And then if you click on, like, it's all online and the children should know it. And if you click on it, then it gives you a list of universities or colleges that and the courses that you need to take or the programs you need to take and the requirements for those programs. So it's different depending on what your child might want to do. So you kind of have to look a couple of years into the future. Of course, not holding the children to anything because they're like 15, but you might want to have to look into the future and explore that with your child. Okay, if you want to do this, these are the things that you need to do to be able to do it. So you may have to take a university level class that you didn't anticipate taking, and then you would be planning that from the time they were younger. If it comes up, oh my gosh, I need to take this university level class, I didn't take it, everyone starts panicking and calling 911. Do not do that. It's definitely not necessary. There's going to be other pathways for your child. So the children obviously love to panic, and so do we, because now their panic is going to impact us. But that's when you go to the school or to community to try to figure out, okay, they didn't take this course. Is there another path they can take? Or perhaps can they take it in the summer, and then that might help them to be able to reach it? But being informed as far in advance as possible, and knowing that if they didn't, quote unquote, they don't do it right, or they messed it up, it's not permanent. They will be able to reach whatever pinnacle they think they want to reach. And there's also an option as well, which some children do, is they go for 4 years to high school, and then they have what the students call a victory lap. That's what my kids call it. And then they do a 5th year of school, and then that might be an option for them to be able to do any upgrading for courses that they might need as well. So applied, technically, you're kind of going to a college level, but that doesn't mean it stops you from going to university. It just means you have to be really aware of your pathway and take some mixed level classes and look to see what programs post-secondary that you need to do whatever it is you want to do with your life.
Yep, there's tons. And I think we're gonna do a session on pathways and getting into college. But parents, yes, you should look at the My Blueprint. Get to know your child's Google Classroom, learn how to go on there, learn how check to see if there's any missing assignments. Like, there's a lot of pieces and sometimes we don't know, but that Google Classroom will definitely out your child if there's stuff that they didn't hand in or anything that you're missing, plus the My Blueprint, which also shows you where they are, and those same assessments that kind of can tell them what their interest might be based on those questions. So yes, get comfortable with that stuff, and maybe we might try to find somebody to present on those pieces because it sounds like it's really important.
And also, to add to that too, like when they have like parent teacher interviews, a lot of people like think, oh, I couldn't go. But if you can't go, you contact the teacher, and they are obligated to speak to the parents outside of those interview times as well. So that's not the only time. So you can outside of just that, you can at any time request to communicate with your child's teacher at any time, and all of them, even in high school.
I'm going to read this question, then we'll go to the two hands. Should a child diagnosed with generalized anxiety have an exceptionality under behavior, even though the anxiety probably caused by his diagnosis of dyslexia? That might be the psych.
I don't know. That is I do not know. So they have generalized anxiety disorder.
Yep. But they've coded it under a behavior exceptionality.
I will have to get back to that person on that one. And the anxiety is from having dyslexia.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I'll go to Kamisha. Kamisha, you could just unmute and then.
Okay, sorry. I was like, where do I get it?
That's okay.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. So my question actually was just I think the comment went direct message. It was just in regarding the that ADHD is not identified as a disability. I was questioning that just because pretty sure I had that conversation with my pediatrician, and I believe it is now recognized as a disability. And so that's something that if families do have that diagnosis for their child, that they can, you know, apply for funding through disability
Oh,
credit.
is
And
it OAP, Ontario?
Yeah, so what I was saying about the ADHD not being recognized is not recognized by like the ministry for IEPs. So yes, it's definitely recognized for as a disability,
Yeah.
but as an exceptionality on an IEP, ADHD isn't an exceptionality on an IEP, but it's definitely a disability that you can apply for funding for 1000% through the government.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And then we had someone else with their hands up. Jane?
Yeah, hi, Jane here. I'm the parent with a question about private school and my daughter being suspended. I'm not sure what exactly to do because the school states they don't have the funding to have a one-on-one with her. They provided for 1 week. They said it cost $100 to have a PSW or an EA with her, and they couldn't afford that anymore. She didn't have a diagnosis then. Since then, she's had the ADHD informal. I should say formal, but we have a full assessment on the 29th. And until then, I would have to keep her home. I haven't been provided with materials for her and stuff like that. So any suggestions, advice? Again, it's a private school.
Yeah, that's the hard thing with the private schools. They kind of run their schools the way they would like to run them, and at the same time, just running it with less resource. If your
Okay.
daughter was in a regular stream school, like a public school, you would have access to a ton of other things. So I think you might, if they're unable to meet your needs, you might need to look at other avenues in which you'll get more support for your daughter. If they're
Okay.
telling you, like Shannon said, that they're supposed to have it, but I don't know, like, how toe to toe can you get with them in terms of that? I don't know.
They do allow OT through home care services and the PSWs like 2 hours a day, but it's still not enough for the full day.
Yeah.
And it seems the letter that I got seems to state that, you know, she cannot come in until she's medicated pretty much. And that will take a while, even if I choose that route. Like
Mhm.
she needs a comprehensive approach, not just, you know, meds that will fix everything, the behavior and stuff.
Well, at the end of the day, Mom, I think it's going to be your choice with that one, right? It's what they're giving, right? What they're giving you, and then at least with the public schools, we know what we definitely have access to. But it's yeah, that one might be difficult because it's a private school.
And even if she attended like public school, the like the amount of students, especially over the years as I've watched, obviously we know the government's changed and so on and so forth, but a lot of students don't get full day EA support.
1-to-1 too, not 1-to-1.
I taught a student
I
that had
understand. I just
Downs, and
don't
she
know
didn't
what
get
to do, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm keeping my options open.
Okay, feel free to just kind of circle back. Maybe we could talk about it a little more, and then maybe you could compare the school boards that you're in, see what specialized programs they have, and then make an informed decision after. Right?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and
And
even
there's
going
also
into
the
the
mental
school,
health nurses that will actually go to the doctors with you, speak to the nurses around medication, because you may not want your child to take medication, right? So there's a lot of options out there, but we could connect after.
Sounds good.
Okay.
and even if you go to the school, like let's say you are thinking, okay, maybe she needs to go to a different school, like definitely do your research before and say, this is my situation. Like, how is this going to look if my child
Goes to
has
your
to attend
school.
here?
Yep. Yep. All right, Evelyn.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you guys so much for having this session. I don't have, my children are not in need of this particular resource, but I still feel so grateful to be I feel empowered just with your workshop. So thank you. And especially to the other teacher, the teacher mom. Thank you for using your own personal experiences to empower the rest of us. Much appreciated. I wanted to add the parent whose daughter has been suspended from school. I think African Canadian Christian Network might be able to assist her. They also work very
ACCN.
closely with parents of Black children. And African Canadian Christian Network, ACCN,
Yes.
they have a partnership with private schools. So I'm wondering if she contacts them, possibly it could be one of their partner schools, and they definitely will go in and advocate on your behalf.
Thank you.
Yes,
I didn't know about that.
Cheryl. That's
Yeah, 'cause-
Cheryl. Cheryl is with ACCN. Yeah.
Yes, they are awesome, but they are very, very busy. Because they have an initiative to get Black children into private schools,
Private schools,
and
yes.
they support you from the time of application until your child graduates. So I know the deadline was last week. So even if they're busy, just don't give up. Keep
Keep pushing.
contacting them.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I know
very awesome.
ACCN is also the holder for the Black Scholarship Directory. So if you have any students looking for scholarships, they are actually the holder of the Black Scholarship Directory. Shannon K?
Thanks, Monique. I just wanted to say to Jane, you know, you're doing the best you can, just as Nia had said at the end of her presentation. And so, like, all the private schools are different. And as Monique was saying, you know, they have their different policies. I just find that they're ill-equipped to deal with kids that have special needs. They don't really have a special ed program put in place, something that's structured, that has like a stream that you could follow, like you know, a hierarchy. There's nothing put in place. It's like when the kids are presented with ADHD or autism, I find that they're just scrambling to deal with it. You know, luckily, you know that we're blessed that, you know, the school they have money, this private school, or at least they chose at that time to put money into getting a social worker, getting the teachers trained. But, you know, every private school is different. But what I wanted to say was that, if I didn't medicate my son, they were requesting that, you know, that we pay additional funds for an EA to be there. So I don't know if that's something they presented you with, that if you wanted to pay for the PSW or the OT or the EA to come in on a full-time basis, how much it would cost. So they did present that to us as an option, but we did put him on meds because it eventually became a safety issue for him. So, and that worked out, and then he got the social work piece. I think while you have your daughter at home, though, if you could get her some therapy, maybe some art therapy or music therapy, just because of the fact that something happened at school, whether it was her fault or not, the physical aggression and the shame that's attached to that. It's important for her to work through that because, you know, if my son made a mistake at school, he felt so bad just going back, and, you know, what the teachers did a really good job at reintegrating him in the classroom and educating the students about ADHD and that it's not his fault and that it's a neurobiological disorder. And so I'm not sure if they did the psychoeducational piece with her classmates, or even try to repair some harm internally with her. But if you can get her some therapy, I think that would be great. I am a mental health therapist and I do have private practice, but, you know, I have, I know, you know, several mental health therapists as well. And I'm pretty sure Nia does too. So, and Monique and Jillian. So you have a community here that can support you. But you know, if she's acting out in an aggressive way, I can only imagine how much she's hurting inside, right?
Yeah.
So she does need support, and you need support too. Watching her go through this and then not, you know, you're trying to figure out how do you support her. That's hard for you too, right? You know, you may experience this powerlessness and helplessness. So it's good for you to be able to meet with someone to hold space for you so you can process these thoughts and get resources. And so I think that's important, as well as kids with ADHD thrive with structure. So my son has really good structure at the school. So in the meantime, as she's home, provide that structure with her, right? Getting her up at a certain time, and then you know, they're usually kinesthetic learners, ADHD kids. It's not a one size fit all, but that's what I've seen in my lived experience and professional experience. So getting her out for a walk, or, you know, really having something structured in place so she knows what she's, you know, to predict. what's next, so that when she goes back into the school environment, it will be an easy transition. So yeah, those are just some of the thoughts I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Shanna Kay. And we do, if you follow our social media, we do share Shanna Kay's information. She is a registered social worker. So if you follow Be the Change, you'll definitely be able to get her information. We do also drop things into our WhatsApp group. So again, I've put some information at the side. If you want to get into our WhatsApp group, just send us an email, admin@btcbethechange.org. It's just quicker with, WhatsApp. You forget about the session, you just click it, you're jumped on with the Zoom link. So it's just easier. We have our next session for the IEP coming up on the 29th. Obviously, it's a hot topic, so we're going to continue the conversation. And then with Peel Board, we're also doing a Black Book Fair where we're going to be featuring Black authors from across Canada. There's also going to be a AI breakout room for kids and a comic book creation for kids. So that's that. I also post the wrap-up evaluation poll. Please, if you guys could just click on the poll so that we can get your feedback. We need to get, feedback in order to prove to the government that this is clearly needed. There's 38 of us on this call tonight, right? And that's just a fraction. So when we do it next week, we're probably going to have the same numbers. So come out next week and we will be doing this again with different information to kind of review what else we need to have for our children in terms of information. Chevelle?
Sorry, I just wanted to, you shared your the email address earlier, I think. I don't have the
Yes.
information with me. I have to find it, but there is there are options to get the psychoeducational assessment at a reduced cost. So I think like University of Toronto offers it, but there's a list that I have. I just don't have it right now. So
Okay.
the admin email that you shared, I don't know why
Yes.
I can't find it.
It's
If you
back
could post
in
it
the chat
again.
now.
I just put it
Okay.
at the bottom of the chat, yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll email it to you and then you'll be able to circulate it. But there's different, I know U of T does it, but there's other universities that do it, but sometimes they'll do it for $500. Some you can apply for subsidies. So it's done obviously by students, but it's also obviously under the doctors, but that's an option. So you're not paying a higher cost to get that done because I know it could be pretty costly.
Absolutely. Thank you. And this is it. If we don't come together to talk to each other and to share this kind of information, then we're kind of going through it by ourselves. So we will continue to hold this space, follow our social media, join our WhatsApp group so that you can get like ACCN. I share Cheryl's information there. Like everything is shared in that WhatsApp group. So what I can say is maybe send us an email. I don't know if Jillian can get the link for the WhatsApp group quick enough because then it's easier if you just click on it. Alternatively, we can, if you just email us, we will send you the WhatsApp link.
I'll
Again,
put it in the follow-up email that will be sent out because I
Okay.
actually don't know how to put the link in this.
Okay,
chat, so-
already. We'll find it and send everything out. And again, so if you're not on our email list, send us an email. We'll add you so that you can get all this information. I would unequivocally like to say thank you, Ms. James, for all of your work. It's a lot to talk about and it's a lot to explain. I work with the schools during the day and I don't know all of this. So every time I listen to you, I feel like I've learned something new to go back to share that information with the parents. So everybody's saying thank you in the chat. We really do thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you. Thank you. That being in these spaces fills my soul. So I will continue my evening with a full heart. So thank you.
So happy. Alrighty. So we will see you all. We'll send out the link for next week. And we will see everyone then. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you, ladies. Well done.
Thank you.